All right. Welcome back to Blue Grit Radio. We got a very special episode today. I got my buddy Trevor Wolcott, here on the online studio. What's up, Trevor?
What's up, man? Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we've been talking about doing this for a little while, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird to be on this end as opposed to just listening to you. So,
Yeah, well, thanks for listening to me, like some of them at least.
of course, I'm probably 50% of your listens. I'm trying to pad your stats.
Yeah, it's all helpful. Um, so before anyone just decides to stop listening, the hook here is that Trevor and I have been friends for quite a while, majority of both of our careers, but we met through law enforcement, through our agency, my agency, but it's still your agency, man. I mean,
Yeah,
it's your,
I guess it's yours right now, so it's fine. You can have it.
yeah, it's a 10-year career for you,
Mm-hmm.
which
Yep.
is nothing to be ignored.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's part of where the episode, where I'd like it to go, but kind of talking about people that come into the job and that it can be, and it should probably reasonably be considered as not necessarily a 30-year career. I mean, I just don't know how many people that are coming into the workforce now, or older millennials. I think as we're technically are. I'm older than you, so I think I'm right on the edge. But it's just super uncommon to be doing any one thing for that long, and we can kind of talk about that too.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer that. I mean, we've had this conversation before. That sometimes there's this expectation in law enforcement that you have this 30-year career or 25 or 20-year career. And I think it's kind of a strange expectation to have because there's several reasons. I mean, it can be an incredibly traumatizing career. It has some pretty big demands on your family.
Hmm.
And I think it's healthy and important for people to recognize that however long they make it in law enforcement, whether it's 5 or 10 or 30 years, that's okay. And there's nothing wrong with that. And so um, I know a big part of your thing is recruiting, but I also think a little bit of the direction of this might be towards officers that are already there, and they're kind of in a stage where I was at for a very long time, where you question whether you should stay or go, and I think that's a conversation worth having sometimes.
Yeah, for sure, man. So we're starting to the deep dive, which is awesome. But I think what I appreciate for sure is that, yeah, like my day to day has been hugely recruiting, and so that does inform and does guide a lot of what I'm thinking about at work, outside of work, what I'm posting about, what I'm trying to share out to be helpful. But really, the crux of like Blue Grit was more in the wellness space, peer support, fitness, just emotional support. So yeah, that recognition that um, yeah, burnout's a real thing, and what can we do to support current first responders so that they have a meaningful, healthy, or healthful, optimized career. And so it's very much still part of the conversation. Yeah, I mean, I am a hiring sergeant on paper, but at the same time, like I just want to help law enforcement in all the ways, and if that helps, if these types of conversations help people realize that they're not stuck, and that it is their time to punch out, and whether it's 5, 10, 15 years, or these types of conversations help them get unstuck in a different direction, and maybe they do kind of refine their purpose. I mean, that's huge too.
Yeah, and we'll probably touch base on this, but I mean, we talked earlier this week about how you've had several different hats in your career, and oftentimes in law enforcement, each job you go to is very different. I mean, whether you're a patrol officer or detective, they're essentially a different career.
Hmm.
So speaking to that, I think there is ways to change your job, but staying in the profession, and so that's an interesting topic as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of what made me and Cortinas, people that follow this podcast, really successful in recruiting is after a while we got comfortable deviating from the quote unquote recruiter, only focus on the positives. We I don't think that I don't think anyone could cite snake oil that we sold. We were very intentional about that, being cognizant of what we were saying, how we were saying it. But what I mean is that we got comfortable just kind of being transparent and embracing real talk. Like, it's
Hmm.
not sunshine and rainbows. We got comfortable saying, hey, like, if you work here, it is a grind. It is a high crime city. That's why I went there. That's why a lot of officers chose where we work. The South King County, but it's been really meaningful, right? So there's pros and cons, but that no one is blinded by what they sign up for once they hit the street. And so, yeah, just that sense of like, yeah, like emotional health is a real thing. Danger is a real thing. Here's what we're doing to combat that. But there's no guarantees, right? We can't choose what happens in our life, much less the career.
Yeah, and that's a good idea. It's realistic expectations from the beginning.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I've talked numerous times about what brought me into law enforcement, whether it's on other podcasts or I've written about it. Um, and just for the listeners, like Trevor's my boy. So, and we'll probably go there as far as like it was definitely hard when you stepped away, but I hope that in your memory, it was a very constructive and supportive role that I took on, recognizing that it's not for everyone to stay. And I think speaking on all the things we're already starting to cover or scrape the surface on is I've verbalized numerous times with my team and with my crew and my friends, like, hey, I think all first responders have to recognize that they're just one day away from not being able to do this job, whether by their choice or someone else's. And I think that can sound scary, but it can also be really empowering and be supportive towards things like gratitude and just taking care of your family and making sure everything's the right balance for you.
Yeah, I mean, there's a million different tangents of what we could go on with kind of some of the things you brought up, but I think it's important to have passions or some backup plans outside of law enforcement, just in case I mean, you could even get injured or whatever it might be. But I mean, yeah, we could have a
Right.
whole separate episode just on that mindset,
Yeah.
and also the mindset that a lot of people have in any career where you think that you can't do anything else because this is all you've ever done. I mean, there's a whole road we could go down on that might be best used for a different time.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I've written about that, but let's rewind a bit. So just, I mean, start at the beginning. So for you, for the listeners, like, what was law enforcement to you? Is it something that you always wanted to get into? And kind of tell us about your journey into the job.
Yeah, it was something ever since I was a little kid. I wanted to be a police officer. I knew it from as long as I can remember, and it's a path that I really pursued. I wasn't very much the goody two shoes in high school, though. I made a ton of mistakes and did some things that I'm not necessarily proud of.
Mm.
I partied a little harder than I should have, and things of this. So,
It's called life
so
experience.
exactly, and I very much look on that now. I think that it's important that this profession has people um, that made mistakes and went down different roads, because you learn so much from it. And I think that was a big hindrance for me and a lot of people is you think, oh, I can't do that because of what I did as a kid or things like that. And that's not the case. That life experience can make you a better person, and as long as you're honest, you should be
Yeah.
fine, even if you have to test with several agencies. So
No,
it
yeah,
was
let me
something I always,
interject real quick
yeah,
just
go
because
ahead, go ahead.
there are some younger listeners, so this is not an invitation or a challenge to go
Oh,
find yourself
yeah,
some,
yeah.
hey, I'm a pretty goody two shoes. Like, no, stay on your track, you do you. I'm just, yeah, this is definitely like, no, you don't have to get those notches on your belt if that's not your jam. That's great,
Yeah,
right? Do your thing.
yeah, I'm not advocating for the path I took. So if you are doing good, stay on the good path.
Uh,
I'm advocating for some of the other side where, um, and you've already done it and you look back and you can't change it. So yes, do not go and do stupid stuff just to
just
gain quote
cause.
unquote life experience. Just because,
Yeah,
yes, I'm not advocating for that.
perfect. But take
Um,
ownership where you did and learn from those
yes,
mistakes.
and I
Awesome.
mean that's the biggest thing is I tested with multiple agencies, and some agencies I went to and I told them the things I had done and they were disqualifiers, and I moved on to the next.
Hmm.
And I was fortunate enough to just stay honest throughout the process and find an agency that didn't care, and they hired me, and I had a great 10-year career with them. And so, um, if you're truly committed to it, just always be honest and push through. You will find an agency, and you'll find your right fit.
Yeah. So what did you visualize a full 30-year career at the get-go? And did you think about other things back then?
I mean, it's hard when you're brand new. You're just like, so excited every single day. You're just thinking of that day, and the world is your oyster. But yeah, I never thought that I would be doing anything else when I was brand new. So I guess in that way, I did envision a full career. Um, at the beginning, you're like, this is the best job on earth. I will never do anything else for the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm. And so
And
in the beginning, that sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead, go ahead.
What and so looking at your career, I'm going to ask you to kind of reflect on some moments or just themes, like the highs and lows, and then that will lead on to maybe the reflection of like why that changed and in growth and processing.
Yeah, there's a ton of highs, way more highs than lows, especially when you look back and reflect on it. It's almost like I don't know, any bad experience, or you have like this might not be the best example, but an ex, and at the time it was miserable, but a few years down the road, you're like, it actually wasn't that bad. But no, I
Selective
had a,
memory.
yeah, exactly. But no, overall, I had so many highs, and I'll never forget, if there's younger listeners or people that are just starting the process. Um, One of the biggest moments is the day you pass FTO and you drive out of the bullpen by yourself. It's like you're 16 again and you just got your license. It's like the
Mm.
biggest, best moment of your life. Um, and there was an old sergeant who said, "You're going to pull out of the bullpen and look yourself in the mirror and say, I'm an effing badass."
Oh, that's
And
so
I,
good.
and I didn't do that, but you feel that way. And so you just have that high when you're new, and you develop this camaraderie with your friends, and they basically become your life, your brothers, your bros, as we would call it. And we became very close,
Yeah,
um,
total bros.
through that. Total bros. Yeah, in
Disgusting.
every sense of the word, it really is disgusting. Thankfully, we're not talking about our like outside life of bro, like bulking season, bro dates, and all of that stuff.
Oh yeah, those were the days though.
But yeah, I guess when I think back on what kind of changed, I guess a lot of things. I can't necessarily pinpoint it at one. I'm sure you've talked about it before. The death of Diego was a big catalyst for things.
Yeah. Hmm.
Um, Not initially in the moment, but I think it definitely. No agency has a line of duty death, I don't think, without some long term ripple effects, of whether people leaving the profession, or essentially just a group dynamic breaking up. That kind of was what I felt. It just never really felt totally the same afterwards,
Yeah, for
and
sure.
understandably so. And so, not to get too long winded or anything, but and then getting a family. There's multiple reasons, but I guess at the end of the day, I just realized I didn't have the passion for it that the job deserved, and I didn't want to be a cop just collecting this pretty significant paycheck, and just skating by and really being a drag for my teammates. And so, um, I just knew that it was time for me to venture out and try something new.
Yeah. No, that's good. And we've talked about it so many times and we've reflected on it through the years. And I think that's one of the things that made us close, in addition to our early friendship being broness and, yeah, going out to eat and just calling it like, adventure bulking squad, where we'd go to different ethnic restaurants and just order the menu with a couple other guys and just feel disgusting about ourselves. No, the food was
Yeah,
amazing, but like you should just not eat that much food in one sitting. Um,
yeah,
all in the name of bulking.
that's right.
um, no, but I think that's realistic, right? So there are times like I want to have these kinds of conversations, and I try to have them when I can. It's hard with wearing a lot of hats, like you said, at work, but I want to sit down and I want to share this real talk, and it's not like a warning, and it's not supposed to be like the boogeyman, and it's not supposed to plant a seed of like, hey, don't think about a long fruitful career, because it's absolutely possible. Like I look around at my own agency and neighboring agencies and people I've met through the years, and there's a ton of people like looking at the short tunnel now towards retirement, and they still have a smile on their face. And I'm trying to do everything I can to emulate what they do, how they carry themselves, how they live in their personal lives, because that's usually, as I've seen, the governor. But um, yeah, like I think that we've talked so much about just police work evolving and how we've grown, that I think that's what's made us really close and have being able to have these kind of transparent conversations.
Yeah, I mean it's like the old saying, you are who you hang around, you are who your friends are. And if you are around those officers or friends who have a positive attitude, regardless of how many years they have on, you more than likely will have that attitude and have that desire. And the flip side is true as well. If you're around toxic individuals or very disgruntled individuals, you will more than likely become that. So I think that's very important, especially in this career. Is as daunting and as demanding as it can be, it's very important of who you surround yourself with, and that's why you got to find your main bro. So you find
Hmm.
your main bros, and you're good.
Yeah,
Or
or your
broettes,
sisters.
whatever
Yeah,
girl, yes, whatever we
yeah,
call them. Yeah, I don't couldn't think of the term.
yeah. Broettes. Yeah. So yeah,
Broettes.
and we will come back to the highs, but since we were talking about Diego's death, man, we talked about this, but did you ever think? I mean, you learn about the risks, the dangers. I think we conceptualize it for ourselves. Like I've definitely thought about my own mortality a lot, or just being in fatal situations, being a new cop, a new recruit. But did you ever think it would happen to one of your own?
I mean, no, no, never. And I think everyone says that, and it kind of becomes this cliche term where everyone's like, "Oh, I never thought it would happen to me or one of my friends." Even though you do visualize it happening to you or one of your friends all the time, you play with
Mm-hmm.
those what if scenarios that make you safe.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you can do those all the time, and it doesn't prepare you for when that event actually occurs. I mean, you're never prepared for an event where one moment you're sitting with your friend and 5 minutes later you'll never sit with your friend again. I mean, that's just, I don't think the human brain can really ever prepare itself for that completely.
Yeah. No, I mean it's crazy. Like I mean, you can think about, or let's go down this road, but like, how many times have you been on the radio, or you found out, one of your partners wasn't doing what they should have, right? They went out, maybe they didn't park very far away, but they basically rolled up on a fight instead of waiting for you and your other buddy. Like, we've chewed those people out, right?
Oh yeah.
And we hear it in the radio, we hear their all the commotion in the background, and they're already in this sucky situation, and you're trying to get there, and you worry, right? Like it's like you can visualize what might happen, and that's why we train a certain way. That's why we talk about these things. That's why we hold each other accountable on safety, and we should have this call out culture. So hopefully those listening in the job, hopefully you have that at your department. Like call everyone the f out, right? And that's one of the main things I say as a supervisor is like, hey, safety has no rank. If I roll up and I'm doing something like my heads up, my rear end, like call me the f out. And if the chief does that, call him the f out. And he has the humility. We have the humility in the culture. Like safety's first. Like it's not about ego. It can't be.
Oh yeah, I would agree, and I would say you're doing your friends and your coworkers a disservice. Now, there's a tactful way to call out a supervisor. We're not saying
For sure.
go up to him and say, "Hey, you effing idiot." I mean, I don't know if we can swear on here, so I'm going to try my best not to.
I've done it a
Um,
couple times, but we're doing really good. We're keeping it
yeah,
PG right now.
exactly. I mean, there's a tactful way of doing it, but um, yeah, you have to call each other out, and you will be that person that makes mistakes. I've done it. I've done things that were dangerous and stupid, and people called me out, and you feel embarrassed, as you should. But you should accept that they're only calling you out because they care. If your friend is doing stupid things and you don't call them out, um, that's a huge issue, and it shouldn't be acceptable. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, going back a little bit to your point, like we imagine these things, we know it can happen, right? We've lost many officers next door, in as far as our area, and you see it online. We know these fatal circumstances. We know cops get killed and the frequency it happens. But all that said, right? All that understood, when it actually happens that you're in your town, with your I mean, Diego is one of our best friends. I think that the word we used a lot, I definitely used a lot, was it was surreal, right? It didn't feel real for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, and I would agree. I mean, I was there at the scene with several other officers. I mean, I was a part of it, and it still felt surreal. And that's probably some coping mechanism with your brain and not wanting to accept it. But yeah, surreal is the perfect way to describe it.
Yeah. And then the converse, can't remember if I talked directly about this, but I was not there. But
Mhm.
survivor's guilt is a real thing, and I could do very little for the initial part, but think about all the reasons why I could have done something different. And this was even like, I was saying that I shouldn't have promoted, because that took me off the crew. We were all in the same crew together. I was the dog handler. So like that would have just been the thing. And we've seen our own friends and colleagues do weird, super irrational, super unfair to themselves versions of this, um, trying to justify and take some weird ownership of something that they have no business doing.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's almost like you want to punish yourself for something that really you couldn't have changed.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. Yeah, the people that were on the scene have a sense of guilt for whatever the reasons, and people that were at home asleep have a sense of guilt. Like you said, I mean, you create this scenario where if I wouldn't have promoted, I would have been this canine officer, and this would have happened. I mean, you create like 50 different variables that may have put you in a position for the 1% chance to change this. And it's important to recognize that you're doing that and consistently remind yourself. I mean, that's not reasonable.
Yeah. Have you thought about the process after? Like, what helped you climb out of that? The morning and the dip that we felt, and yeah, what your takeaways were following that.
That's a great question. I think we are in a unique position of being a very close knit agency, more so than most. And I think every agency probably gets some sense of extreme closeness after a loss like this, where everyone's family and everyone's um, there for each other. And we had that at the beginning,
Hmm.
very strongly, and very big support from the city and the mayor and things like that. But I think it was just friends being vulnerable with each other. I mean, I think I cried on every single shoulder that was around me, even if it was a
Hmm.
stranger for days. And I had friends, other coworkers come to my house unannounced, and we just sat there and cried, like total, not the most masculine thing, but looking back on the healthiest thing.
Yeah. Or maybe
And,
it is
and
the most masculine thing, to
and
like,
I would argue
right?
that it is.
Yeah. To like
I mean,
face it and be in it and support each other and get
I
over
mean, dude, we've joked
stigmas.
about
Yeah.
this. Once you become a parent, it's like I cry at everything. I watch like TV shows. Like I was watching MasterChef, and there was like a really heartwarming moment, and I started tearing up, and I looked away from my wife because I was like embarrassed. I didn't want her to see me, so I like
Dude,
laid my head on the pillow. But I was tearing up at MasterChef, and I was like, God, this is what I've become.
dude, we both, I mean, you have a boy, I have a girl. They need to see us cry, right? They need to see how we are setting the example to not be ashamed of emotions and to process stuff. Um, but yeah, it definitely changes you for sure.
Yeah, I mean
Yeah,
all of it, and I think
yeah, Disney, there's no safety in Disney. Like yeah, I will have the waterworks going at the end of a Pixar movie
yeah,
for sure.
and I to go back to Diego's incident, I think that's a big part of that. Is obviously I dove heavily into therapy after that, and before that I had never done it, and now I almost feel like it's something where I mean, especially on your podcast, probably you probably talk a lot about fitness because you're ripped and that's all you care about. I think is being swole as
Oh, less
f.
so
But
now. Thank you though.
yeah, um, but it's funny we place this big emphasis on physical fitness and going to the gym and working out, but we place very little emphasis on working out our brain and this mental wellness. And I think sometimes it's viewed as this weakness, but to me, it's no different than working out. And in other terms, it could be as simple as who doesn't like unloading something to a total stranger if it's on your chest. Like you could go to therapy and just talk the whole time and you're going to feel better.
Hmm.
And so I went immediately after that event, and it's hard because you'll never know how low you could have been without going. But I think it saved me, and it really made me work on some things from earlier in my life and kind of open the door. But I'm a huge advocate for therapy. Um, and I wish there was even a different word for it. But I guess the best way to look at it is if you work out your body, work out your brain, and work out your issues, and always try to make yourself a better person. And I think everyone should have like a semi-annual check-in with a therapist, just cause why not?
Yeah, I really like that, man. And that's one of my more recent episodes to talk about therapy, and I give a little nod like, hey, I've always been this peer support guy. You've been a long term peer support guy, so it's not like we're running from our emotions and talking about them, and we are, in the broy sense, like always checking in on each other and the people around us, whatever our crew is. Um, you've always been a really charismatic person, and people gravitate towards you, and I think that's why it was hard when, for an agency our size, like a mid-sized agency, for someone as social butterfly and informal leader as yourself, took a step back. And I think that there's also a lot of power in that, being that, hey, like this is an amazing chapter of my life, highs and lows, way more highs than lows, but I'm stepping away with on good terms, on my own terms, and it's what's serving me and my family. And you'll always have those gratitudes and sense of service. I mean, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself because we've just talked about this so much, um, in that episode, I talked about therapy. I'd never gone, right? But you talk about how you went, and you were the one who pushed me, right? I gave a little nod saying, hey, one of my bros like told me, bro, you need to go. And it's gross how much we're even saying bro, but that's just life. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you were one of the ones that was like in the most vocal, saying, hey, like, you I really hope you go, like asking me to go. And it was hugely different, right? Like, I could talk about something with the chaplain and all my buddies, peer support or otherwise. I could talk about with my wife. Um, and that was maybe part of the problem. Like, I could talk about it with my wife, and I did, like, every day. And I went through this
Mm.
narrative of like the night we both found out in the middle of the night on the phone. And she woke me up to like learn about it, um, from our other buddy, through a phone tree. And so, all that to say, although I was so vocal and such a proponent for therapy, like, I just never went there. Um, so what helped you get over that hump? You talk about like foundational stuff and how, even, before cop work, and I'll say that's very much the same thing for me. Like, it wasn't just the death of Diego, it was all this other stuff that happened in the job, and then all this other stuff really the just was part of my life or childhood, right? Like, that's
Mm-hmm.
most of it for most people.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess if you're asking what pushed me to get over the hurdle of going to get help, it was Diego's incident. I mean, I don't even look at it as I had it. I just did it. Like in my mind, I just did it because I felt like it was part of the process. And I think we might even been. I don't think we were mandatory put to go, but it was just expected that you'd at least go check in.
Mm.
Um, and that kind of set the catalyst for it. And I mean, within a couple of visits, I was like, this is it. And I was talking about things from my childhood or growing up or whatever, in addition to that incident. And so, um, I don't necessarily. It wasn't like I got some moral courage to do it. It was an extreme life event, an extremely traumatizing event that I knew needed to be unpacked, and so I just kind of jumped in.
Yeah. And then when you said you almost wish that you could call it something else, are you alluding to the stigma that comes with the word therapy?
Yeah, and I think there's a lot less so with our generation and even younger, but there still is. It's like if it's this weird thing that if you want to get help for something you're struggling with mentally, somehow you have a problem. But if you went to like a physical therapist for a knee injury, no one
Mm-hmm.
would care. Um, and so I mean, obviously, if I wish there was a different word, it's because there's a stigma associated with it. But now I'll proudly tell anyone, and I don't care. And I think it's a sense of strength to acknowledge that you needed to go, that you were vulnerable in a way. But it's also different for everyone. I mean, there might be individuals that it doesn't help and it's not for them. So I'm not necessarily saying if you have tried it and it didn't work, that there's something wrong with you either. But I'm a huge advocate for it. And I wish there was no stigma with it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing that. And it is, we do liken it, to every other like facet of health, right? So
Hmm.
for physical health, like, you need to eat right and you should move and exercise and go see a doctor. But what I liken it to in my therapy episode is like, hey, if one doctor gives you a diagnosis or a prognosis and you hate it or you don't agree, like, cool. Like if like go find another one, right? Get a second
Yeah.
opinion.
Yep.
Um, let's not all paint them with a broad brush, stereotyping or whatnot, right? And ultimately, you're right, right? Like you can talk to 2 or 3 practitioners and be like, I just don't. This isn't my jam, but you know what? Going to my church or my synagogue, or like I have a weekly date to go into the woods for like a half day with no phone on me. Like, I mean, that could be your quote unquote therapy or your mental reset and kind of connection with whatever it is that heals you.
Yeah. I mean, don't write it off because of one. I mean, I don't know if you remember our psychiatrist for our agency when we got hired. I don't know if it was the same one for
Yeah.
you, but he spoke about like lasers that the FDA was blocking and some beds that shake the toxins out of your body for like 45 minutes. And I felt like I was in like a loony bin.
I
So,
talked about him in that episode too, so I almost
of
wish you were
course, you,
like,
okay.
yeah, you got to check it out. Like,
Oh,
yeah, I was like, I don't know if he was trying to say all this weird stuff because he quoted Ludacris in mine. Um, and if he's just like,
it's because he's trying to relate to you, Eric, and that's
well,
how he could do it.
yeah, clearly, but I didn't know at the time. I was like, man, is he just trying to say things to elicit a response? But now I just think that he was a weirdo.
Yeah, yeah, I'm with you.
But we don't use him anymore, which is good.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you for sharing all that insight. I think it's one of those drums that like we'll need to continue to beat. Us in the industry, first responder world, whether past or present, because it will take that redundancy to remove stigma. I think at the time, finally, when everyone, I mean, I think we're getting there in the right pockets where people are like, okay, yeah, I hear you, therapy, okay, okay, but that's what
Yeah.
it takes for you to actually do it, right, or actually
Yeah.
be open to it.
Yep. Yeah, you kind of got to be beat into it sometimes. It's just like I keep bringing the same analogy up. It's just like physical fitness. Sometimes you got to be beat into it before you take the leap and do it.
Yeah, it's not comfortable to do something new. I mean, that's always the case, right?
Yep.
Let's talk about the highs. We spent a little bit of time on the lows for sure. Um, what are the highs that stick out to you? And it could be incidents, or it could be just concepts or just general things that you remember you miss.
I mean, we could tell war stories all day and bore all your listeners out of their mind. But I
People
mean, I
love
definitely,
people love stories. That's one
yeah.
thing that I made. Uh, yeah, my wife makes fun of me because I'm just one that I want to get like the takeaways, whether it's a book or something. But people love the stories. They connect with the
Yeah.
stories. So if you have
Yeah.
one,
They're like, tell me the
please.
story and I don't care what you think. Just tell me the
Yeah,
story.
yeah,
I mean, I can think of some major highs. I mean, obviously, one of them was you and I, a hostage rescue call with, and obviously you can chime in because you got to this call a little bit earlier to me. But it's when you look back on your career, and especially newer guys going into their career, and you think of like these major life changing events or these major things that you're a part of that you look back on and you're like, I will be proud of this for the rest of my life. And I
hmm
cannot believe I had the opportunity to do it. This has to be probably in my top three of all time, and it's an event that is surreal, and it's all the dynamics of saving a child and all these very high risk things that you do it in a split second moment, not understanding the full repercussions of it. So I don't know if you want to start with it because you were the one that called to it, and I'll kind of chime in when I jumped in, or how you want to do it. But I
yeah,
think
yeah.
it's a great feel good story, and if you have new guys wondering if they want to do this job, this will be like the our like military hype one where it's
Okay,
like we
yeah.
tell you all the
It's a
cool things you can do.
it's a gut check one for sure, and I think that's
Yeah.
really powerful too. It just illustrates it on such a higher level. So I'm glad this came up. I was actually have very few notes, but this is one where I was like, man, if we could go here. I haven't told this story. I don't think on any format yet. So um, yeah, I mean, without going too much detail, in the interest of time, not just there's nothing like privilege that we need to um, be cognizant of. But yeah, I remember it was a snowy day, right? Daytime.
Mm-hmm.
It
Mm-hmm.
was a neighboring agency to us, and we were aware it was on our radio, but we were aware that there was a high critical incident, right? So there was a high stakes incident where one of our officers from our department had already gone over there for hostage negotiating, right? So crisis negotiator, she's a rock star in that, and I think that, well, I know that made a huge difference in how the day played out. But first,
Mm-hmm.
she was just off to go there, right? And so it was on my radar as a supervisor, but I didn't, okay, that officer's off the street and over there, and I'm just aware something's going down there. They're not really asking for any help at this point. What happened though was essentially a couple officers, and these are the vague details that I remember off the cuff, but a couple officers were in this neighborhood for some random call, and a woman comes down the street, and something's happened. She's been assaulted significantly. Her ex or whatnot is in the house with their 2-year-old son, and he's got a gun, and he's elevated, and all the things that would help you recognize, like, this is a bad call. We need to deal with this, right? And so that's where they had, eventually they contained the house, and now we have a hostage situation, or a potential hostage situation. I guess for the non-police officers, we as police have to recognize that anytime there's someone that, until we know that someone's not free to leave, like, we have to consider the risk of a hostage situation. And then when you consider the state of the person, whether it's a bedridden elderly person or a 2-year-old, like, that person doesn't have their own choice, right? So, very high stakes situation. From my memory, the local officers surrounded. They're trying to get a line in, call out, and the dude actually shot at the officers.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, no officers were hit, and that's where the situation really kicked up. Right? Is that what you remember? Where we got called in?
Yeah, yeah, that's when they asked for an outside agency assist. It was after the individual shot at them.
Yeah. So there was a group of us where I'm like, okay, me and a few others, let's go. And then you were going to get the armored car because we kept it up in our city.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like getting that car? You know where I'm going, but what was it
Well,
like grabbing
yeah,
that and driving through the snow?
yeah. I mean, it's an unusually snowy day, and that I'll never forget. I get on a highway to get to you guys, and there's not a car on the road around me. And I give it a little bit too much gas, and the whole thing starts getting squirrely and going sideways on the freeway. And all I can think is, I'm gonna wreck this thing, this armored car. I'm gonna wreck it on a freeway for no reason because there's no other
Roll it.
cars around me. Yeah, roll it over, all because I wanted to go 40 instead of 35. So yeah, after losing control of it, I
Turns out
regained.
that thing has 4-wheel drive, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. I also forgot about that part. It has four-wheel drive, but I thought it'd be better to drive a two-wheel drive the whole time. So
Saves
just
gas.
lesson learned. Yeah, yeah. I was all about fuel economy. So yeah. I almost wrecked, but I ultimately made it. That's the moral of the story.
Yeah. So
Uh,
you got I almost wrecked too. So, I mean, this is one of those things, and I don't think I was pushing it hard, but I did have a clunky Tahoe at the time. It was 2-wheel drive, so go figure those decisions. Shout out to decision makers. But that thing, and there were two of our guys behind me that watched me almost spin out. They're like, "Oh, here we go." So it was fun to talk about it way after the incident, or not way after, but once it was all said and done. But yeah, so I'll own that too. I'm sure all the people from around the country, there's a smattering of you. You're probably laughing because it's true. We don't know how to drive in the snow in the Northwest. It happens like once every 3 years. So
oh yeah, if a snowflake touches the pavement, we're wrecking.
yeah. Um, but yeah, I guess I'll cut back, and you get there with the armor, and then all of a sudden it's basically like us four from the PD, our negotiators elsewhere, but it's us four, and I'm talking to the sarge of that agency, and then another dude from the SWAT team from another city. But then the sarge was a prior SWAT officer, maybe he still was. But we're kind of putting our heads together, and we're forming an EGO team, or an emergency go team, and it's basically the four of us, and then the local sergeant, and then the other dude,
Yeah.
right?
Yep. Yep.
But from my recollection, and everything that was coming across the radio from our negotiator in the relay was that basically everything that sounds like it's going to go wrong is going wrong, right? Um,
Yeah.
he's getting more and more elevated. He's on FaceTime. They can see the gun coming. They can see him holding the gun, right? Like it's coming by his face and all that. So it's very known that he's armed. They can see the kid. They can't see the kid. They can hear the kid. He's walking around. The slider was open, right? Or like, sorry, the screen door was shut, but then the front door is open, so you could see movement of the door, which for anyone in the job like that makes you, pucker up every moment, every time that happens, right? To that extra super duper hyper vigilant phase, when you're covering that. But yeah, it everything as to my recollection was just like, this is not going to be a good situation. We're gonna have to go in there, or he's gonna force this situation.
Yeah, and this is where a lot of our training comes in, and a lot of our what ifs that if you're a new applicant or you're doing beforehand. Obviously, you've probably never been in this situation before, and the only way to help prepare for that is to try to create these what if scenarios. And so, this is the ultimate what if scenario, and everything that could was leading to be worst case scenario was definitely seemed to be playing out.
Yeah, yeah. I remember there was just no really great situation. Once we had that armor there, it was really our only point of cover, right? Like it's a flat street, no trees or anything in the yard. I remember talking to the sergeant, wondering if we could get a high point, the house across the street, and fire could get a ladder and all that. But then before super long, I mean, I don't even know how long it was. We'd have to look at like a report, um, but eventually, like, we have our team, and I'm going to be the shield guy, and we're kind of figuring that out. And then all of a sudden, it seems like the relay on the radio is that he's going to put the kid out, right? He's going to let the kid go, and we got to go get him. Um, and for me, and I'm curious where you were at that point, but instantly I was like, this is a setup. This is an ambush. Like, he's already shot at the cops. We're going to walk across outside behind this cover for into no man's land, which seems like a football field, but it's just a normal residential street. Across the street and across the yard, and he's going to open fire, and we're just going to be sitting ducks out there. I mean, what were your
Oh yeah,
thoughts at that point?
yeah. Mine was the same thing. And just to kind of paint the picture for the listeners, is imagine basically this one level house with a, let's just say, standard front yard and standard driveway, and then a street right in front of it. And we were in the armored car, essentially kind of right in front of the house for
Mm-hmm.
just ease of description. So basically, and there was no way to get really closer than where we were. So we had to leave this armored car, maybe walk, let's say 50 feet to the front door. It might not even be that, 30, 40 feet. But yeah, of no man's land, no trees, no rocks, no cover. And there's these huge windows on the front of the house, which are right next to the front door. So yeah, for sure in my mind, I was thinking this is going to be, he's going to lure us out with this promise, and he's going to open fire and do suicide by cop. And I was just hoping that we were able to deal with the threat before one of us was hit.
Yeah.
And the craziest thing, I mean, you and the other sergeant kind of formulate this plan of essentially this rescue team that we have to create. And I don't know exactly how that conversation went, but what's surreal to me is we formulate this plan where essentially I think 4 or 5 of you guys create this human shield where you have an actual shield, and the other
Mm-hmm.
guys are just standing shoulder to shoulder with you, um, with me walking behind you guys, and you guys all have long guns in the shield, and I have just a pistol. And the whole goal is you guys walk up, creating this human shield protecting me to grab the kid and run um, when we get him. And I what's surreal to me, reflecting back on that moment, is we made that decision and everyone agreed to it without a second thought. But
Mm-hmm.
what you really agreed to was to get shot and potentially killed on the chance that I then could grab that kid and run.
Mm-hmm.
All of you guys did. And that's
Yeah.
a surreal moment to reflect back on. And it shows what you have to be willing to do in this job to say, okay, this might be my day. I'm going to step out from behind this car so my partner can grab this 2-year old that I have never met before and might not ever see again, and get away. And I mean, I don't, I'd be interested to know what your mindset was being in the front, kind of being that meat shield, as we call it, because mine was incredibly humbling in the back.
Yeah, yeah, man. Yeah, I think you're spot on all those things. And so, earlier before we started getting into the story itself, you're talking about the split second decisions, but I mean, that's less of one, right? We're processing it, and it's almost worse that rather than you hear a scream and you boot the door and you go in, and you see what happens, um, it's more that like you have a moment to chew on what could happen and how that might play out and try to curb things. But yeah, like I was sergeant from another city, and all of a sudden I'm the shield guy because I was like, well, no one's holding the shield. I'll hold the shield, and then that's my role now, right? Um, and then I just recognized like a shield is not a wall. It's just what you see is what you get. So as best I remember, like we have guys with long guns and they're well trained, and one of them's a SWAT officer, another two are very proficient, and so they're going to tuck a little bit behind, but we're not all fitting behind that thing for sure. But for the professionals, like your cover can be your gunfire, right? So there's some added benefit to having more guns out. But yeah, you're right. Like the plan was kind of like I'm not a sports guy, but it's almost like you have all these linebackers that are going to protect the ball carrier, right? Once you get there, and
Linemen. Jesus, you can tell you're not a sports guy. Linebackers tackle the ball carrier.
okay, man. Like the fact that I
You might
even
want
went
to
to
edit that
sports,
one
like
out.
no, it's
Yeah.
it's gonna be there forever.
Okay.
So
But yes, the linemen protecting the ball
okay,
carrier.
the other sarge was the linebacker because he was backing us
Okay.
up. Okay, so, but yeah, we will be like, we might be chewed up or eaten up on the field, right? But as long as you get where you need to go, like that's a success. And I did think it was a trap. I did think it was all that, right? But I knew, and I know we all knew because there was no hesitation, right? There was conviction in our eyes when we looked around. We're like, if this is the day, it's the day. Um,
Hmm.
but I remember, yeah, we have to take that chance. Like if there's a shred of a chance that he's not bluffing, and he really does want like what's best for his son, and then we can figure out the rest after, um, then it's worth that chance. Talk a lot about risk reward with my new officers, especially with law changes and pursuit policies and all that. But ultimately, like you can risk a lot to save a lot, and you have to risk it all to save. I'd say it all being like children. Um,
Hmm.
we look at recently at this time of the recording, we had Nashville PD like demonstrate what an active shooter response should look like, and not so long ago we see in a different part of the country what an active shooter situation cannot look like. Um, and that was my thought. Like I remember thinking, okay, don't trip. There's snow. There's a curbing. Like if anything, stay standing. And when that gunfire comes, don't falter. Like don't fall. Right. If you get hit in the shins and the feet, like you have cortisol, you have adrenaline. Like you do not trip. Like at all costs, you do not fall down. Um, but I will say, like in the moments, probably just seconds, but somehow I remember thinking about it because I was a newer dad. But we all have, I think, a lot of first responders have connections when they recognize something similar to their own family or their own kid. Um, but my daughter was roughly 2, so I was conceptualizing a couple things. One being that, yep, I'm on, I'm signed on. Like this is, I'm in, I'm fully in. At the same time, it wasn't so much a fear of being. I mean, for sure, no one wants to get shot. I'm not trying to be some like puffy chested, badass. I'm just saying an awareness of being shot. But I remember thinking, if this is my day, one day Marley will have to understand. She'll have to understand that I didn't have a choice, and she has to be proud of me for that, and my family has to be proud of me for that. They have to understand, right? Because fact of the matter, something happens with my kid and her daycare or, God forbid, wherever, I trust that there are professionals out there in whatever city it is, working whatever shift it is, that are going to step up and go save my kid. Like it has to be that way, right? Like I'll do it for a stranger, right? I'll do it for this family. Someone will do it for mine. And I think that in some ways that is what community is about. That is what first responder, the oath we swear and the promise we have to serve and protect. Like it's what it's about, right? But I remember thinking about that, and it was definitely a heavy thing to think about.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy what your mind will do in the moment and what you can think of so quickly. Um, and yeah, and yeah,
Yeah,
and so we go ahead.
was your wife pregnant at the time? I'm trying to do the math.
I don't know. I can't keep track. It's all just a giant blur.
Yeah,
I
dad
mean,
life.
it's definitely changed since then. I mean, I think it might have been easier at the time because I didn't have a kid. I mean, my son's 2 years old now.
Hmm.
I couldn't imagine the context of having your own child because I think that takes everything. Um, but yeah, what a heavy thought of like your daughter learning about this thing down the road, but you still do it. I mean, it's oftentimes I get embarrassed by like the cheesy, like I took an oath or I'd
Hmm.
lay down my life for someone else. And I don't ever boast of it verbally because it just feels cheesy and
Yeah, we
weird to
have joked a
say.
lot about those oaths, right? Like,
Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
I'm no hero. I'm
Yeah,
doing what
I just
anyone
did what
else would
anyone
have
else
done.
exactly. Like
Man,
we
we love
almost
saying that.
mock it. We mock
Yeah,
those sayings, but then the funny thing is then you do it in person and there's no other way to describe it. So you're like, okay, I'm eating crow now. I'm a little bit of a douche. Um,
no, no, no. It's the
but
real deal because not everyone does do that. We've seen that. We've seen
yeah.
it.
Yeah,
There's a
oh,
lot.
and
There's
I don't even know
everyone
if we've
has
got to
those.
it.
Yeah, everyone has those officers that when shit hits the fan, like they're not there. They're never there, right? They're always the fifth or sixth person there. And hey, like it is what it is. Every agency, every culture has something like that or someone like that. But I feel very grateful that those aren't the people answering up to come to a possible shooting at officer situation in the next city over, right? Like the people that are committed are the ones who show up, and thank goodness, because we were able to accomplish what we needed to accomplish without hesitation. And I've never been, I mean, this is one of my proudest moments, but proud of the guys. And I say the guys to include, our negotiator that was on the call too.
Oh, she's a rock star. I mean, none of it would have happened without her. How
No.
awkward. I mean, we're kind of leaving it out. We did move up. He opened the door.
Yeah.
The kid came out. Um,
A diaper,
I
right?
think
In the
from
snow.
yeah, in a diaper in the snow. And from what I remember, did only walked like a couple feet out and was probably incredibly scared seeing six cops there.
Hmm.
Um, and I remember just grabbing that kid and sprinting. And sorry, I left you guys behind. I have no idea how you got out of there, but
No, that was the goal, right? I
yeah,
remember the Sarge, I'm pretty sure it was him that said, go, go. Like he was just yelling at you to get the F out, right? And then for
yeah,
us, it was like slow, deliberate backing up because we were still waiting for it, and ready for it. And like breathing's a thing. And I remember my heart rate was just like, my heart was about to beat out of its chest, right? But I was just, don't trip. And we're all kind of, your shoulders are contacting. So you have the sense of where everyone is. And finally, like that pressure like just really just immediately came off once we got back behind that armor. It was the best
oh
feeling
yeah,
ever.
oh
um,
yeah,
but it was like, yeah, at that point, for the non-professionals, it's now we can wait forever, right? There's one guy in there, it's his choice. He can give up whenever he wants, or if he pushes the issue, we're behind safety. Not pure safety, but we can address it from a safe um, situation. So
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a lot more chill after that, for lack of a better word.
yeah, but for those that want to know, like he did eventually surrender, which is great. He did try to light the house on fire, like some people. I mean, that seems like a thing, right? Like people light houses on fire when they don't want to come out and they want to try to make this big thing.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what that because if anything, that forces you to come out, like unless you just want to stay in there and burn. So
Hmm.
like, I'm
Hmm.
not quite sure, but yeah, that interesting ending. But
Yeah,
yeah, well, they
not
got him in custody.
yeah, yeah. I remember,
So
throw a little police jacket and a little police beanie on that kid, and got him reunited with mom, and
yep.
a good
Yeah, it's the
freaking day.
weirdest thing. You do that and then you just leave. Then you just
Yeah,
drive
and
away
then
and you
it's
and you write a report later and then it's like it never happened behind in your memory. It's the craziest thing. I mean, you'll have these insanely huge events happen, and then you just get in your patrol car and you drive off, and then you got to go to a theft report right afterwards.
Yeah,
I
on
mean,
to the
it's
next
just
one.
it's surreal, man. It's like a profession like no other.
Yeah, someone's teenager took the car. Like we got to go talk to them about that, right?
Yep. Yeah, and then you have to have the same amount of empathy as with that situation, and so that's always the unique part, because in your mind you're like, okay, do you know what I just did? But
Yeah.
I guess I'll talk to your son who doesn't want to go to school.
Yeah, it's like it's hard slash impossible to have that, right? And that's where the compassion fatigue and like it's yeah, I mean like I think you can hang your hat up on call like that. I feel like you should have like the rest of the month where just you're like, hey, nice job. Like you earned
Yeah,
it.
yeah. Nope. You just move on, but it is what it is. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, when I think about highlights, that's probably my number one. Outside of just having some of the best fun with some of the best guys around. I mean, we could talk all day about that, but
Yeah. Yeah. Very grateful. I mean we did get sweet awards, so
dude, that's what we do it for. Just medals and awards.
yeah, yeah. I mean we're like,
Mm.
we're both I think keep it in the box like it'll be cool for a kid to look at later kind of people. Um, but not to disparage awards. Like awards, I think recognition is huge, and I think it's huge
Oh,
to
yeah.
recognize your officers, especially those leaders. Right? Like don't sleep on those opportunities.
No, it's super important. And as much as we all try to act tough and say they're stupid, I'll tell you what, I recently looked through mine. I've been out almost a year.
Yeah,
Uh, and it was a very rewarding experience to sit and look at them and feel a sense of accomplishment. So keep your awards if you're in the profession. They might seem stupid now. Keep them in a box, and at some point down the road, you'll look when you're outside of the job and feel a huge sense of accomplishment. And if you're a leader, um, that piece of paper might seem dumb, but it's not. It's worth its weight in gold. You need to recognize your guys for what they do.
yeah, yeah. And I think what awards are great. They can be when they're well-meaning, when they're accurate. Um, we won't go more into that. But yeah, I think what was more cool for me than the award was hearing one of our good buddies who's a SWAT guy say when he heard about the story, he's like, "Holy shit, man! Like in HR, a hostage rescue, that's the Super Bowl of police calls." And so like to hear it from like the expert, right, the person that trains it the most, and he's been on them. I guess to get that kind of peer professional accolade was meant so much too, right?
Everyone wants a pat on the back from the SWAT guy. Let's be real.
Yeah,
If
I
you
mean,
ask
like,
them, they'll tell you they're the best. And so,
but if you
no,
like, if you
no.
did this, like, if you closed this crazy, if you found out the suspect off some like totally confounded case where it was kind of a shot in the dark, and like your hotshot, just really reputable homicide detective came out and said, "Hey, man, that was legit." Like that would mean a ton, right? Like
Oh,
it's not
yeah.
just like that's what they train, that's their bread and butter, and when you hear it from them about how it was handled, because he's on the team with one of the guys there, then I mean it means a lot. It's very validating.
Yep. No, I'm all about that. I totally agree.
So
Mm.
reflections now, and I'm watching the time, we're doing great, right coming up on an hour, but one part I did want to talk about was what you've gained from police work and then your current adventure and your current career and the things you took away from there that have aided you in being able to start this new thing.
I think it was really hard to know what I gained from police work until I left. And like we kind of talked about, if anyone knows a guy that's been a police officer for a long time, they always have the same thing. Oh, I don't have any other skills. I don't know what else I could do that I'd make this much money. A
Hmm.
lot of this type of talk. And I quickly realized once I left, um, this job creates superb people. I mean, we're probably most people that get into the profession are good people in general, but you get a level of expertise in conflict resolution and communication and confidence that you will never find anywhere else. And I would argue that confidence and communication are the keys to any successful career in the public or private sector. If you're confident and you know how to talk to people and be respectful, you can succeed in anything. And so once I stepped outside law enforcement and looked around at some of these jobs and some of the people that had them and things like that, I really realized how well this job prepared me for the outside world. I mean, there's very few things that stress me out or that I feel like I couldn't conquer when you look back on what you've done in a 10, 15, 20-year police career. So obviously I left. I went into real estate, a very different type of job,
Mm.
but many of the same carryover things, just attention to detail. I mean, you learn that in law enforcement with all your case reports. I mean, they are expected to be 100% truthful, and a ton of detail, because someone's liberty, their freedom, rests on your case report. If they committed a crime, you have the most powerful position given to anyone in the country. You can take someone's freedom. And that relies on your attention to detail in your case report. So that carries over, and communication and all these things, and even a sense of service that never leaves you. Even now, I still feel like I have a duty or a sense of service to people in the community, even though I'm outside of law enforcement. Now I just use it a little bit differently. I help people. I protect them during transactions, and a lot of times my biggest thing now is I try to protect them from other agents who I think are maybe not in their not doing the best that they can do. And so
Yeah, for
um,
sure.
I don't know. The job gives you an insane amount of skills, and it's bad that you sometimes only recognize it once you step out. But it's
Yeah.
an amazing career, and there's so much potential. Um, I mean, yeah, I don't even remember all the questions you asked, but I'm
No,
not doing
that's great.
necessarily doing like a big self plug on my after work career. Um, but yes, if you are a first responder and you want an agent that gets you, I'm your man.
Yeah,
Um,
if you're coming to the mid, like the Pacific Northwest,
yes.
where can they find you so we don't miss that? How
Uh,
they get a hold of you?
Best way is probably I'm Trevor Wolcott at Severs Real Estate. My phone number, they can give me a call, 509-264-2100. I'm super chill if you just have any questions real estate related or law enforcement related and you don't believe Eric when he tells you how good everything is.
Yeah, real
And
talk.
you want, yeah, and you want a real talk second opinion. But no, I mean, I'm super chill. Um, and I definitely take care of my first responders, and I kind of understand what you guys are going through. And for you new recruits, I can help you and say, hey, maybe hold off on that house till till you're done with probation.
Yes,
Um,
yes. Stop.
but
Don't
yeah,
get the new truck. Don't
yeah,
stop.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's going to be hard because you're going to make more money than you probably ever had. But wait till you're off probation, my friend.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I like how you hit on the things, right? Communication, the detail orientedness, right? Like you have to articulate your thoughts, and yeah, it's not a police report's not going to directly translate to, I would imagine, a lot of other vocations, but just being able to remember all these details and then put them in an orderly way where someone can understand it later,
Hmm.
communicating verbally, empathizing, right? Like these are
Yeah.
home purchase is stressful, right? I did it once, and I was maybe fortunately because I was just a single dude, and I was just like, well, the market's good and it's a good investment. Everyone tells me so. So I wasn't really emotionally in it. I didn't have to move a family and just, worry about timelines and what about my kids and this and that. And what if the thing falls through and my family doesn't have anywhere to live? Like, I recognize it's a huge endeavor. Um,
Oh yeah.
I was just in a weird pocket of, kind of the young guy that didn't have to worry about a whole
Yeah, the
lot.
best age. Now you have a lot of responsibility, sir.
A lot of responsibility. Yeah. No,
That's
but I also
right.
like how you talked about well, those like hard skills, but like the confidence, right, and the response to stress.
Oh yeah.
When you have a situation like, yes, it's not commonly the story that we took you guys on with us. That's not that those are the few and far between, and a lot of officers might not ever have a situation quite like that, just based on where they work or what their assignment is, and that's cool. But like, just the ability to come into a situation where you know very little and things are rapidly evolving and there is danger component, there are high liabilities. I mean, me and Trevor were both on our civil disturbance like riot team, and we were deployed to actual riotous situations with people throwing Molotov cocktails, and our buddy got hit by a rock when we were marching through gas filled streets downtown Seattle. Like, this is stuff that we've encountered that felt, again, surreal, kind of like a video game in some ways, but also like there's definitely a pucker factor. I'll speak for myself of like what could happen if the crowd did a certain thing, right? But it kind of makes everything else a little easier, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, it's like anything else in life. The more experience you get in whatever it is, the more confident in it you feel, and the more stressful situations you're in, the easier they become. It's like the first time you ran code, you probably drove 5 miles above the speed limit, and you were white knuckling it.
Mm-hmm.
And then years down the road, not me, but maybe someone else would be running code and with driving with one hand and it just as relaxed as can be. But yeah, it's the same thing.
Yeah, man. However, I'll say this, and I say this to a lot of people that are considering a career change into police work. Maybe they're in their 30s or whatnot, even 40s on. But a lot of them have families, and I like to say this, not buttering up anyone, but man, if you can raise children in a responsible way, this job is not that hard. Parenting is so much hard. Being a good parent, I try to be a good parent, and I'll find out later, right? Like, he won't really know until a lot later, but way
Yeah.
harder than police work.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Test your patience way more. I mean, my 2-year-old tests my patience more than the job did in many ways.
Yeah, yeah,
It's just different. And I mean, the job can be so much fun. It's insane how much fun it can be. You just have to try to hold on to that stuff through some of the BS and the stuff that is not as fun.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, well, man, I think we've covered a lot of good ground. Is there
Yeah, I
anything
feel
you
like
want
we've
to
been all
leave?
over the place.
Yeah,
No, I mean,
okay.
I feel like people listening are like, what did I just listen to? Because we were just a whirlwind all over the place. But hopefully it was good for them. And I appreciate having me on. It's always fun to talk about this stuff, and hopefully it's a benefit to someone out there who's either interested in the career or is currently in the career.
Yeah, I know it will be, and that's where I mean, as soon as I was pondering doing a podcast, and then people were like, "Hey, you should do a podcast. You should have some guests on." You were one of the first that popped in my mind, clearly. So, thanks for coming on, bro. It was a good time. And lastly, I'll say, if you ever want to get back in the car and look in that rearview mirror and tell yourself you're a badass,
Okay.
you
I
know
do
who
that
to
every morning
call.
when I drive out of my driveway now. As a
You're
small tear comes out of my
yeah,
eye, I tell
you're a
myself.
badass.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
good.
exactly.
All right, man. Well,
All
thank
right, man.
you.
Talk to you
Thanks for
later.
coming
Of
on,
course.
and thanks for listening, guys. I'm
Heck
signing off
yeah.
now.